Okay, so welcome again to Hebrew Story Hour. Today we are reading Genesis 27. I'm not going to read the whole chapter, but we're going to read the majority of it. And I was thinking about titles for this, The Secret Blessing, or something like that, if it was a movie or a scene in a movie. So we're really getting, this is our second story about Jacob and Esau. We saw just a brief introduction to them in chapter 25. Okay, so I'm going to read at least through verse 40 and translate, and then we'll have plenty of time, I think, to talk. So the Lord bless the reading of his word. Chapter 27. Vayihi ki zaken Yitzchak vatichena einav meirot vayikra et Esav beno hagadol vayomer elav beni vayomer elav hineni vayomer hine na zakanti lo yadati yomoti va'ata sa na chelecha tel yicha v'kashtecha v'tzei hasadeh v'tzuda li sayid v'aseh li matamim ka'asher ahavti v'havia li v'ochela ba'avur tivarechecha nafshi b'terem amut. Okay, translating now at verse 1. It happened that Isaac was old, and his eyes grew dim from seeing. And he called Esau his son, his oldest son, and he said to him, "My son." And he said to him, "Here I am." And he said, "Look, I'm old, and I know that I do not know the day of my death. So now pick up your weapons and your quiver and your bow and go out to the field and hunt game for me. And make for me some tasty food, just as I love, and bring it to me so that I might eat, and so that my soul might bless you before I die." Verse 5. Rivka shoma'at v'daber Yitzchak el Esav beno vayelech Esav hasadeh latsud sayid lahavi v'Rivka amara el Yaakov bena lemor hine shemati et avicha medaber el Esav achicha lemor. Verse 7. Havia li tzayid va'aseh li mat amim v'ochela va'avarechecha lifnei Adonai lifnei moti va'ata v'ni shema b'koli la'asher ani mitzava otach. Verse 9. Lech na el hatzon v'kach li misham shnei gedaye azim tovim v'e'eseh otam mat amim la'avicha ka'asher ahev. Verse 10. V'heveta la'avicha v'achal ba'avur asher yivarechecha lifnei moto. Okay, verse 5 translating now. Rebecca was hearing Isaac speaking to Esau, his son. And when Esau went to the field to hunt game to bring it back, Rebecca said to Jacob, her son, saying, "Look, I heard your father speaking to Esau, your brother, saying, bring some game to me and make savory food for me, so that I might eat and so that I might bless you before Yahweh, before I die, before my death. And now, my son, listen to my voice, to what I am commanding you. Go to the sheep. Take for me from there 2 young, good goats, so that I might make them as savory food, tasty food for your father, just as he loves. And you will bring them to your father, and he will eat, so that he will bless you before he dies. Verse 11. Vayomer Yaakov el Rivka imo, Hen, Esav achi ish sa'ir, va'anochi ish chalak. Ulai yemusheni avi, v'hayiti ve'enav kim ta'tea, v'heveti alai, kalala v'lo baracha. Verse 13, Vatomer lo imo, alai kilatcha beni, ach shema becholi velek kachli. Okay, translating verse 11 here, Jacob said to Rebekah, his mother, look, Esau, my brother, is a hairy man, but I am a smooth man. Perhaps my father will feel me, and I will be in his eyes as a mockery. And I will bring upon myself a curse and not a blessing. And she said, his mother said to him, your curse be upon me, my son. Only listen to my voice and go and get it for me. Verse 14. Vayelech vayikach vayave le'imo, vata'as imo tam amim, ka'asher ahev aviv. Vatikach Rivka et bigdei Esav b'na hagadol, ha-chamudot asher ita babayit, v'talbesh et Yaakov b'na hakatan. Verse 16. Ve'et orot gidaye ha-izim, hilbisha al yadav, v'al chelkat savarav. Verse 17. Vatitain et hamat amim ve'et halechem asher asata the yad Yaakov bena. 14 in translation. And he went and he took and he brought to his mother. And she and his mother made savory food, just as his father loved. And Rebekah took the garments of Esau, her son, her older son, the finest, I should have said, the finest garments of Esau, her older son, who was with her in the house, or which were with her in the house. And she clothed Jacob, her son, her younger son. And she clothed upon his hands the skins of the young goats, and upon his and upon the smooth part of his neck. And she made the savory food and the bread, and which she had made, or she gave it, the savory food and the bread which she had made, into the hand of Jacob, her son. Verse 18. Vayavo el aviv, vayomer avi, vayomer hineni, mi ata b'ni. Vayomer Yaakov el aviv, anochi Esav, b'chorecha, asiti ka'asher dibarta elai, kum na shava va'achla, or actually va'ochla, mitzedi ba'avur tivarechani nafshi, or actually, sorry, nafshecha. Vayomer Yitzchak, this is verse 20. Vayomer Yitzchak el beno mazeh maharta limtso beni. Vayomer ki hikra Adonai Elohecha lifanai. Vayomer Yitzchak el Yaakov Geshana va'amushka beni. V'ha'ata ze beni Esav im lo. Verse 22. Vayigash Yaakov el Yitzchak aviv. Vayimushehu. Vayomer hakol kol Yaakov. V'hayadayim yedei Esav. V'lo hikiro ki hayu yadav ki de Esav achiv seirot vayivarechehu. Okay, going back to translate in verse 18. And he came to his father and he said, "My father." And he said, "Yeah, here I am. Who are you, my son?" And he said, Jacob said to his father, "I'm Esau, your firstborn. I have made or prepared just as you have said to me. Get up, sit, and eat from my game, so that your soul might bless me." And Isaac said to his son, "What is this? You've hurried to find my son." In other words, how have you prepared this so quickly? How is this that you've hurried to find? And he said, "Because the Lord your God has happened before me, or he has given me success." And Isaac said to Jacob, "Draw near so that, and I will feel you, my son. Is this you, my son, Esau, or not?" And Jacob drew near to Isaac, his father, and he felt him. And he said, "Oh, the voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau." And he did not recognize him because his hands were like the hands of Esau, his brother, were hairy. And he blessed him. Okay, verse 24. Vayomer ata ze b'ni Esav, vayomer ani, vayomer hagisha li v'ochla mitzed b'ni lema'an tivarechecha nafshi vayagish lo vayochal vayave lo yayin vayesht. 26. Vayomer elav Yitzchak aviv geshad na uksha or ushaka beni li beni vayigash vayishak lo vayarach et reach begadav vayivarechehu vayomer re'e reach beni Kareach Sadeh Asher Beiracho Adonai. Verse 28. Vayitin lecha ha-Elohim metal hashamayim mishmane haaretz v'rov dagan vatirosh ya'avducha amim vayishtachavu lecha leumim chevei gevir leachecha vayishtachavu lecha b'nei imecha orerecha arur umevarechecha baruch. Okay, so translating in 24. And he said, "This is you, my son Esau." And he said, "It's me." And he said, let's see, we have draw near to me, or come bring it near to me, so that I might eat from the game, my son, so that my soul might bless you. And he brought it near to him, and he ate, and he brought to him wine, and he drank. And he said to him, Isaac, his father, said to him, "Come near, and kiss me, my son." And he drew near, and he kissed him, and he smelled the smell of his garments, and he blessed him. And he said, look, the smell of my son is like the smell of the field which Yahweh has blessed. And he gave to him, and may God give to you from the dew of the heavens and from the oils of the earth, and the abundance of grain and new wine. May it let the peoples serve you and bow down to you, and the nations, or another word for peoples, worship or bow down to you. Be a master for your brothers, and the sons of your mother shall bow down to you. The one who curses you, be cursed. The ones who bless you, be blessed. Well, I'm going to keep going, and then we'll have one long conversation. So we're in verse 30 here. We're going to read through the next blessing. Vayehi ka'asher kila Yitzchak levarich et Yaakov vayehi ach yatsa Yaakov me'et penei Yitzchak aviv ve'esav achiv ba mitsedo vaya'as gam hu mat amim vayave le'aviv vayomer le'aviv yakum avi vayochal mitzed beno ba'avur tivarachani nafshecha vayomer lo Yitzchak aviv mi ata vayomer ani bincha bechorecha Esav vayecharad Yitzchak charada gedola ad ma'od vayomer mi afo hu hatzad sayed vayave li va'ochal mikol b'terem tavo va'avarechehu gam baruch yehyeh. Translating verse 30. And it happened, just as Isaac finished blessing Jacob, and when Jacob had just gone out from before Isaac, his father, Esau, his brother, came in from his hunting. And he also made savory food. And he brought it to his father, and he said to his father, "Let my father get up, and let him eat from the game of his son, so that your soul might bless me." And Isaac, his father, said to him, "Who are you?" And he said, "I'm your son, your firstborn, Esau." And Isaac trembled fiercely, or trembled a great trembling. And he said, "Who then was he who hunted game and brought it to me, and so that I ate from all before you came in? And I blessed him, even with the blessing, even now he will be blessed." And when Esau heard the words of his father, he cried out great outcry, and was severely bitter. And he said to his father, "Bless me also, even me, my father." Oh, wait, I forgot to read the Hebrew for this. I just got so caught up in the story. Okay, sorry, it really goes on, but sorry, we're gonna go back and read verse 34. Kishmoa Esav et divrei aviv, vayitzak tza'aka gedola, umara ad ma'od, vayomer la'aviv, baracheni, gam ani avi, vayomer ba achiv, achicha, v'mirma, vayikach birchatecha. Verse 36, Vayomer hachi kara shemo Yaakov v'yakeveni ze pa'amayim et bechorati lakach v'hine ata lakach birchati. Vayomer halo atzalta li baracha. Verse 37, Vaya'an Yitzchak Vayomer la'esav, hein, gevir samtiv lach, ve'et chol echav natati lo, la'avardim, v'dagan, v'tirosh, semachtiv, u'lecha efo, ma e'eseh b'ni. Verse 38, Vayomer Esav El Aviv, Habaracha achat hi lecha avi, Baracheni gam ani avi, Vayisa Esav kolo vayevk. Going back to 34 now to translate. Just as Esau heard the words of his father, he cried out a great outcry, and he was severely bitter. He was severely with everything. And he said to his father, "Bless me also, my father, even me." And he said, "Your brother came in deceit, and he took your blessing." And he said, "Is it because he's named Jacob that he has Jacobed me? He has betrayed me these 2 times. The birthright he took, and look, now he's taken my blessing." And he said, "Have you not reserved for me a blessing?" And Isaac answered, and he said to Esau, "Look, I made him master of you, or lord over you, and all of his brothers I have given to him as servants, and the grain and the new wine I have sustained him with grain and new wine." And let's see, this would be, and so go then, what will I do, my son? And Esau said to his father, isn't there one blessing to you, my father? Bless me also, me, my father. And Esau lifted his voice and he wept. Verse 39, Vaya'an Yitzchak aviv vayomer elav, Hine mishmane haaretz yihyeh moshavecha, umetal hashemayim me'al, ba'al charbecha tihyeh, be'et achicha ta'avod. V'haya ka'asher tarid ufarakta ulo me'al savarecha. So translating these two verses, Isaac his father answered, and he said to him, behold, away from the oils of the earth will be your dwelling place, and away from the dew of the heavens above. And by your sword you will live, and your brother you will serve. And it will be just as you roam about, you will break his yoke from upon your neck. The story does go on, for Esau hated Jacob over the blessing, which his father blessed him. And then but I think that's where we're going to stop for today, because it kind of moves into another story. Okay, full of drama. I try to occasionally represent Isaac's old voice and some of the drama, but I'm sure it could be done even better. What are you seeing in the story, and what maybe questions or observations do you have? Scott?
I just kind of curious, like the blessing that was given seems to be irrevocable, like it can't be taken back.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that was something that it's like I don't know. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on how that's portrayed in both in culture but also in the story, and if that's representative of something else in the story of Scripture, the irrevocable blessing of God, to his people.
Yeah, it's true. Blessing has, I think this story makes this abundantly clear that blessing has what I would say efficacy, like something happens in the spoken word, and once it's spoken, it's done. The closest we have, maybe y'all can think of other examples, but we have for this is like maybe in marriage vows or something, where once the word is spoken, like a vow is, it's what we call a speech act. In other words, something happens in the speaking of the word that once it's happened, it's happened. I mean, for Isaac, yeah, this is as good as done. And Esau doesn't ever ask actually for him to take it back. He knows it can't be taken back. He just says, don't you have another one? Right? Is there more than one blessing? And he just begs him for another word. And Esau says, Isaac says, I've already given it away. So, and he does get another blessing. We could talk about the nature of that, but it kind of relates to, it's basically a repetition of the first one and Esau's position in relationship to Jacob. So, and this is such an important part of Jacob's narrative all along, is Jacob and the blessing. He's like a collector of the blessings. And by the end of the story, he will be the one imparting the blessings. But the patriarchs carried a particular blessing that has efficacy because of Yahweh, because of the Lord. I mean, it's like the possession that's handed down to Abraham, to Isaac, and now it's handed down to Jacob. And once it's handed down, Jacob owns that blessing and it can't be given back.
Do you think this is related in 25, 23, whenever Rebecca, the older is going to serve the younger, right? And so she's like, I heard what he said, and I remember.
I do think that's an important story for I mean, there's no doubt that there's deceit in this story. We have Mirma shows up for Isaac, says, your brother came in deceit. There's this, Jacob seems to understand that, if my father finds out, he'll think I'm mocking him. And Isaac or Esau interprets it as with the wordplay of Yaakov, he's cheated me, he's betrayed me. So I don't think there's any doubt that there's betrayal and deceit here. However, Jacob certainly doesn't act alone, and Rebecca is the one giving the commands, and Jacob is going along with it. He doesn't really protest as much as his protest is really childish. What if I get caught? Right? There's no ethical, I don't know if this is right or not, Mom. It's just, what if I get caught? But I do think there's something to the Lord has, one way of interpreting it is that Rebecca knows the plans of the Lord, and she is participating in those plans, seeing it through. And she knows that if Esau gets the blessing, then it's kind of counter to what she's heard in a vision from the Lord. One that, as far as our story has told us, Rebecca has never told Isaac about. Isaac doesn't know, at least, there's nothing in the story that would tell us that. So yeah, there's an argument there that, in fact, kind of, this is not an unethical, even if it is unethical, even if it's deceit, it's really what God wants, because God told Rebecca so in chapter 25. Stephen?
Yeah, I'd like to just piggyback on that. My question for you was going to be, from the Hebrew, do you get that? Where do you get that impression? I mean, this is a controversial passage. People take different views. Has Isaac just gotten old and forgotten? Is this his son, her son? Is this just favoritism at work here? A bad case of favoritism? Or is it Rebecca trying to protect the prophecy, trying to keep Isaac from being cursed by going against the prophecy? I was just wondering, in the Hebrew, do you hear that, and where?
It's subtle. I don't know that I could point to much that's distinct in the Hebrew, as opposed to just the English translations. You do have the his son, her son stuff. I think it does. If anything, you have to look back. If you don't have chapter 25 and the vision that Rebecca has, this is 25, 23 and following, where the Lord speaks to her, 2 nations are in your womb, 2 peoples. And that will be separated. And then you have this one nation serving the other, the greater serving the younger. I'm trying to think about anything in particular in the Hebrew.
I was noticing 27:7, in the presence of the Lord before my death. 27:20, I think you translated that the Lord has given success.
Yeah, right.
And 27, also that the Lord has caused it. The Lord has caused it. Lord's given success.
Right.
Yahweh has blessed later on in the story as well. I was just wondering if these were indications that, as you say, chapter 25 really is driving the story.
Yeah, I guess I think there's ambiguity here. And as there is just with Jacob's story, I think Jacob is a trickster. The story recognizes that. But we tend to impose to an extent our own understandings of deceit. I think you mentioned 27 verse 20, where now this is this is Jacob speaking to Isaac. So it's a question of, is this a lie or not? Right? Is he that the Lord your God has made it happen for me? This phrase occurs in 24:12, in I think a sincere way. Yahweh, the God of Abraham, said, and then we have the same verb. He's made it for me today. Do chesed with my Lord Abraham. So sort of like God's providence. I think this verb indicates this kind of that this is the Lord's work. I mean, he's answering the question of how'd you get this so fast, right? So the question is, I think this is intentionally ambiguous. Is this a lie, or is this really the work of the Lord that Rebecca overheard and she interceded before Isaac could mess things up, and deceived Isaac in order to carry out the will of the Lord? And is that God's word? I don't think it's super clear. I mean, I wouldn't argue it's murky, and the story of Jacob is murky. And so the other way of taking this is God worked through their flaws. I think that's abundantly clear in the patriarchal stories anyway. Dan?
I would like to cast this in the light that God throughout Genesis is depicted as bringing good out of chaos, bringing good out of evil. The evil of the deception is not in any way compromised in that. This is deception.
Mm-hmm.
Deception all along for Rivka as well as for Yaakov. But God is bringing something good out of it. And I think that there's something for us to focus on what that good is in verse 40. It says, by your sword you will live, your brother you will serve, and it will happen in doing that, in wielding the sword, serving the brother, in doing that, you tear yourself loose from the yoke.
Yeah.
If the imagery comes to my mind that Esau, like Ishmael before him, was intended to be sort of a sergeant at arms, a commander of a military force working for the good and the protection of the child of promise. And if they take that role, if they accept that role of being the enforcer, for the protector and enforcer for the child of promise, they will feel the freedom of doing what they were created to do. That's the blessing that God is pulling out of the chaos of deception.
Yeah, I like that. And you're definitely you're right about the parallel here with Esau and Ishmael, and how, I mean, Isaac knows that story. That's his story. And now his sons are experiencing it. With the blessing, the two blessings are, I think, really interesting. And I translated the beginning of it away from the oil of the earth, like looking at in 39, verse 39, and your dwelling place be, and away from the dew of the heavens above. But if you just compare the blessing in verse 28, it's the same min preposition, from the dew of the heavens and from the dew and the oils of the earth. I think that's probably right. Like that Esau isn't going to participate in that. But there's another way of, I think, Dan, if I was going to like piggyback on what you're saying, perhaps that Esau will get to participate in this through his relationship to his brother. He's going to be serving his brother, but the only blessing that is left is for him to participate in it. And so you could say that from, I do think it's away from probably, but it's this play on the oil of the earth and the dew of heaven, that Esau somehow could take part in that through his sword.
I have a protege at my job who is from South India, and her family story is that centuries ago they got their name because they were assigned to be the military or police escort for the king, and their job was to stay inside the castle, inside the palace or whatever, with their king. If there was a war and he had to go out to war, they were the ones closest around the king to protect him. A different unit would be the military that went out in the front. A different family name would be those that were actually in the front lines of the battle. So perhaps it's here that Ishmael is to be close as a bearer of a sword protecting Yitzhak, and Esau is to be the one farther out, away from the comforts of the palace.
Yeah, that's not really where Esau goes with it, but perhaps that's what the ideal would be, because Esau immediately turns to hate and Jacob runs away, and Rebecca tells him to do it. So Rebecca is still like commanding here and orchestrating things. This is why. Go ahead.
Initially, but
right.
After the heat of the moment, Ishmael and Isaac are close together. They close Abram's eyes.
Right. And Esau and Jacob.
You know, they make up after a few years.
Yeah, I mean.
So this is, at least on Esau's part, they seem to be making up. Very comfortable.
The stories do follow this pattern, this beautiful pattern. I love like Genesis 33. Well, I guess we'll get there in a few weeks, but it's my favorite part of Genesis, where it's this reunification of Esau and Jacob. But they spend time apart before they come back. Scott, I saw a hand, and then Marisa.
Yeah, I just a quick question here on birthright and blessing.
Oh yeah.
I know I've read about this before, and it's escaped me what the differences are. You know, we usually see them as the same.
Yeah.
And they don't seem to be, from what Esau's reply is to his father. He's arguing, you know, now my brother's deceived me twice. And we kind of look at it like, well, you know, you gave it to him, but apparently he doesn't see it that way.
No. There's this really wonderful wordplay here, because Barak, blessing, and Bechor is the birthright. So and when he says these two times, this is verse 36, you know, you have Bechorati lakak v'hine ata lakak birchati. It's like this chiastic, almost poetic interpretation. Yeah, he definitely distinguishes between whatever his birthright entails of being the older one, and which birthright relates to Bechor, the oldest, and the blessing, Barak. I agree that, I mean, it's clear what the blessing is because Isaac speaks it over him. Maybe somebody else has a good answer for the particular distinction between what Jacob might have gained in birthright that is distinct from the blessing. crowdsourcing this one? Anybody have any good
I had,
ideas?
yeah. I had researched it before because I was teaching this story for children, and you have to really understand it well to bring it down. And so that's been about a year. So I'm going, what exactly was it? But what I remember is the birthright. The idea is just because you're the firstborn, and there doesn't have to be any blessing involved. Like, it's just because you're the firstborn, you basically receive double the inheritance of everybody else. So you would get twice as much as any other individual would, just because you're the firstborn. So it has more to do, I think, with once your father dies, then so he would get 2/3. Yeah, whoever's the oldest would get 2/3, and the next would get, if they only had 2 kids, the next would get the remaining third. So the oldest gets double. That's the way that I remember that. And I saw Samuel nodding his head, so I'm like, I think I'm on target with that.
That makes sense, that in any, whatever the specifics are, that the birthright would be inheritance related, and the blessing is more like the future of the people, really the family future lies sort of with whatever son gets the blessing. Maybe somebody, anybody else want to add to that or fill out that answer? Marisa?
You have one piece that is objective, the birthright. It is set, and you have one that is subjective. So the birthright, he may be forced to give the firstborn by the rule of the culture and the law. I have to give you this, but he may not want to give, he may not like even say the firstborn. And so he can give that he feels that's subjective to someone else. That's one thought on it.
I mean, that does Isaac have the option, if he wanted to bless Jacob instead of Isaac? I mean, I suppose so, because once it's done anyway, even if he doesn't want to. Yeah, so there is some degree of separation between these. Marisa, was that your comment earlier? Or did you have something else?
No, I had something else. Okay. When Jacob comes in and Isaac questions him, I mean, this is his fear realized now.
Yeah.
As he expressed it to Rebecca. It seems like the quickest and easiest way for him to satisfy Isaac and not have to tell a lie is just to say, oh, it's God's work. And, then how can Isaac question anything further? Because then he becomes to question God by basis of the statement. So that was just a thought on that.
Yeah. It's interesting that one thing that caught my eye in reading the story is sort of, he actually, we have the verb for he blessed him. It's multiple times, but then he like blesses him, but then we have questioning again. It's like he keeps on asking, and then so it starts with the feel and then gets to the smell. But so Isaac responds to Jacob in verse 21 after Jacob has told him that it's the Lord's work with, let me feel you. It's not like not like Isaac says, oh, okay, that makes sense. He's into apologetics. He wants to feel him. He wants to smell him. It's and it makes sense that he would. He's just working by logic. I don't know if I'm picking up on what you're saying, but that phrase, it's true that, I mean, people do this all the time, right? When they want their way in church, they'll simply say, well, God told me so, or something along those lines, more or less. And so, but again, I think there's I think this story really plays in ambiguities, as Jacob's story will as a whole.
It seems like an attempt by Jacob to end the questioning. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, right. Yeah, maybe it gets him to the next level, but it doesn't finish it for sure. There's one point I want to make before, make sure to make that there's a psalm that picks up on the blessing here in a really beautiful way. Psalm 133. It picks up on shemen, oils, and in the English translation, I've noticed that they translate it as fat, the fat of the earth, but the oils of the earth and the dew of the heavens. And it's Psalm 133 is about unity. But I think it's alluding to the patriarchal blessing, the blessing of being the people of God. And I'm going to read it. It's super quick. So let me just point it out here. It's Hine ma tov umanaim. So how good, how pleasant is the shevet achim gam yachad, the dwelling of brothers. And here, if we're thinking about Esau and Jacob here, the dwelling of brothers as a yachad, a community, as a unity. And then we have two images of how good it is when there's unity. The first one is kashemen. So that's the word for oil. And we have kashemen hatov, good oil upon the head, running it down upon the zakan, the beard, zakan Aharon, the beard of Aaron that goes down over his robes. It's like, now here's our second metaphor, tall of Hermon, the dew of Hermon, Mount Hermon, which is running down over the mountains of Zion. And then Kisham for there, and there's an ambiguity here. It's, I think, purposeful, looking back to Zion as the place where Yahweh commands the blessing, the barakah, the blessing, but also in the community is the place of the blessing, life ad olam, chaim ad olam. So I think it's important to read this psalm with the blessing in mind and thinking about unity of achim, the brothers, and sharing in the tal and the shemen. It's just a really beautiful allusion to this first blessing we have in chapter 27. Okay, we have about 5 minutes left. If there are more comments or questions.
Lance, could you comment on the word oil, like in the Psalm versus mashma in Genesis, which I think I can't see oil in Brown, Driver, and Biggs on that. I wonder where the oil part comes in versus the fatness.
So yes, so in Genesis, verse 27, 28, you have, God will give to you from the Tal Hashemayim, and then Mishmane. So that word you have after U, you have the min, I would take this as from the shemen, but that's the plural, shemane of the earth. So that, I don't know what BDB has with, if it does it not talk about this as shemen, the plural? Does it cite this text?
The Strong's number corresponds to mashman, whatever that means for you.
Yeah, that's that's where I guess I got it there. But they're saying just the fat or the fertile fatness, the fat. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So they're connecting it with the root, not shem. It's the same root,
Okay.
but they're taking a different noun, shaman,
yeah.
instead of. But if you notice, I'm looking at hallowed, but it is. This is the only text that shaman has. Shaman, how these words relate to each other, is not actually the form that we have here.
Okay.
But
yep.
It's basically a form that only occurs once. And so there's a debate here about whether it should be shemen or shaman.
Okay.
Which are, fat and oil. Shemen is more like olive oil, especially Shem and Tov, good fine virgin olive oil, where shamein usually does mean like fat richness. And certainly that's in here. So I think the fatness of the earth works, but it's it's not exactly the same word, but generically.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, I appreciate that. I had a student once do an amazing presentation on Psalm 133 on the oil.
Yeah.
Really insightful. But yeah, that's a beautiful connection. I guess one other question, which is a massive theologically, but when you were talking about the efficacy of the blessing, I thought immediately of Romans 11:29. In context, of course, this is a massive discussion from chapters 9 to 11. But the statement is, you probably all know, the gifts and the calling of God are irrevocable. And that's a long discussion on this whole aspect of how does this carry forward in terms of God's deliverance, removing ungodliness from Jacob, bringing in the Gentiles. Anyway, I wonder if was any connection there.
Yeah, I mean, election is an important topic in Genesis. I mean, this is what Abraham is elected. He's chosen. Jacob is chosen. I think Isaac is chosen. So like this, the way the promise and the blessing is linked to the lineage. So again, I think the Genesis 12 blessing, the Genesis, and then you have the 15 and 17 blessings are all like being handed down, and there's a kind of election. But yeah, the irrevocable part of there, I hadn't thought about it, but yes, I think when God makes a promise or God makes a choice, I don't know. We have texts where God changes his mind.
Yep.
He is going to do something and then he decides not to do something. So I don't want to say that, God's this machine. I wouldn't want to portray God as a machine that God can't do what God wants to do, but that just basically that God keeps his promises.
Yeah.
You're right. There's a big topic, and we could talk about that for a while, but this story definitely relates to it. And I appreciate the connection with Romans 11:29. Think about that.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, I saw one other. Scott, did I see your hand? Do you want the last word?
I just was going to echo Paul's question there. That was in my head as I was thinking about the irrevocable nature of the blessing that Jacob seems to think, or Esau seems to think that he can't receive it now because it's gone. And is this a foreshadowing of God's nature in that when he blesses people, he blesses them? There's no taking it back. It's a covenant. We see that carried through the Old Testament as covenant relationship with Israel. And then, of course, we just don't have the time to cover that kind of a thing. But that, I just wonder, is this kind of a foreshadowing of that?
I do think there's, just looking again at the Romans text, it mentions forefathers and so on, that there is this really significant and wonderful theological point to be made that we, through Christ, participate in the blessing, that we are heirs of the same election, that God has not stopped. Like, it's not like he cut off the blessing of the patriarchs, that it's the same blessing that's being handed down by God's choice. Good. I'm seeing other texts pop up in Galatians 3:29. That it's really important for Paul because he's dealing with Jew-Gentile issues, and how it's not that he's done with the Jews and now he's starting over with the Gentiles, but the Gentiles are participating in the promises given to the Israel from the very beginning. So that they're grafted in, as Romans would say. All right. Well,
thank you.
I want to be true to the hour, even though this is we could talk for longer, I know, but I'm going to go ahead and conclude officially anyway our reading for Hebrew Story Hour for the week. Thanks for being with me. I'll hang out for a few minutes if anybody wants to chat. Otherwise, we'll pick up where we left off next week. Adonai Machem.
Shalom Aleichem. Thank you.
I shared a children's song